The massive space station hung in the darkness like a metal city. Lights blinked across its surface as ships came and went. Inside the main chamber, creatures from across the galaxy sat in their special seats. Some breathed different air. Others needed different temperatures. The technology kept them all alive in one room. Jake Morrison walked down the long hallway toward the chamber. His boots made soft sounds on the metal floor. He had done this walk many times before. Today felt different. Today, everything would change. Jake was 52 years old. His hair was gray at the sides. Lines marked his face from years of difficult talks with alien species. He wore the simple blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic service. No fancy decorations. No special symbols. Just a human representing humanity. Behind him walked Lisa Park. She was younger, maybe 35. Her dark hair was pulled back tight. She carried a small computer pad with all the important information. Lisa had worked with Jake for 8 years. She knew what was coming. "Sir," Lisa said quietly, "the vote count looks bad." Jake nodded. He had expected this. How bad? 412 votes against us. 308 for us. 67 abstentions. The numbers meant humanity would lose. The Galactic Council was about to limit where humans could go. They would stop human colonies from expanding. They would restrict human ships to certain areas of space. Jake and Lisa reached the big doors. They were 20 feet tall and made of some strange alien metal that changed colors. Today, they looked red. That seemed fitting. The doors opened with a soft hiss. Inside, the chamber buzzed with hundreds of different sounds. Some aliens spoke. In clicks, others used musical tones. The translation machines worked hard to turn everything into words everyone could understand. Jake saw the familiar faces, or what passed for faces on some species. The Zephyrians looked like walking crystals. They sparkled under the lights. Their leader, Speaker Valterra, sat in the front row. Her crystal body was clear blue today. When Zephyrians were happy, they turned blue. The collective's representative was harder to look at. It was part of a hive mind. The individual body meant nothing. It was just a tool for the larger mind that controlled billions of similar creatures. Today, 3 collective bodies sat together. That meant they thought this was very important. Near the back sat the Thaxians. They looked almost human, but with green skin and 4 arms. They had been friends with humanity for over 100 years. Their leader, General Kex Mu, would not look at Jake. That was not a good sign. The chamber president called for order. He was a Rigelian, tall and thin, with too many joints in his arms and legs. His name was something humans could not pronounce, so everyone called him President Flex. "The council recognizes Ambassador Morrison of Earth," President Flex announced. Jake walked to the center of the chamber. A platform rose from the floor to lift him up so everyone could see him. Hundreds of alien eyes, sensors, and other seeing organs focused on him. "Thank you, President Flex," Jake said. His voice was calm and steady. "I am here to receive the Council's decision regarding Resolution 2847. Resolution 2847 was the official name for the new rules about humans. Jake had read it many times. It said humans were growing too fast. It said human colonies were spreading too quickly across the galaxy. It said human technology was changing things too much. It said humans needed to be controlled. Speaker Valterra's crystal body flashed brighter. She stood up. "The Galactic Council has voted. Resolution 2847 passes by a margin of 104 votes. Sounds filled the chamber. Some aliens made noises of approval. Others seemed unhappy. The translation machines worked overtime. Jake just nodded. "I understand," What are the specific restrictions? President Flex read from a long document. Human expansion beyond current territorial limits is prohibited. No new human colonies may be established without council approval. Human ships must register their destinations with council authorities. Human technology transfers require council oversight. Each rule was like a chain. Together, they would keep humanity locked in a small corner of the galaxy. Humans controlled 37 worlds. The galaxy had millions of habitable planets. Now humans would be stuck with what they had. Furthermore, President Flex continued, human participation in certain council activities will be limited. The Exploration Committee, the Technology Development Board, and the Peacekeeping Forces will reduce human membership by 50%. Lisa made a small sound behind Jake. These committees were where humans did their best work. Human explorers had found more new worlds than any other species. Human engineers had solved problems that stumped alien scientists for centuries. Human peacekeepers had stopped wars and saved billions of lives. Jake remained calm. He had expected this too. Fear made people do stupid things. The other species were afraid of humans. Not because humans were violent or cruel. Humans were dangerous because they were different. Other species followed patterns. They did things the same way their ancestors had done them for thousands of years. Humans changed. They adapted. They found new solutions to old problems. This scared the older species. The Council's decision is noted, Jake said formally. Earth will comply with all requirements. Speaker Veltara's blue color got brighter. She had expected Jake to argue. She had prepared for long debates. You accept these restrictions without protest? Jake smiled. It was not a happy smile. The Council has spoken. Humanity has always respected the Council's authority. We understand our place in the galactic community. The chamber got quiet. Something in Jake's voice made the aliens uneasy. They had expected anger. They had expected threats. They had expected humans to act like humans usually did when faced with unfair treatment. Instead, Jake was being perfectly polite. Too polite. However, Jake continued, I do have one request. President Flex nodded. The Council will hear your request. I need to send a message to all human colonies and installations. Official Council business. It should go out immediately. Granted, President Flex said. Jake turned to Lisa. She handed him her computer pad. Jake typed a short message. Then he handed the pad back to Lisa. Send it now, he said quietly. Lisa connected the pad to the Council's communication system. The message went out instantly to every human settlement, ship, and station in the galaxy. The message was simple. Council vote complete. New restrictions approved. Begin Protocol 7 immediately. All personnel return to Earth territories within 30 days. No exceptions. Jake turned back to the assembled aliens. The message has been sent. Earth will comply fully with the Council's wishes. Speaker Valterra looked confused. Protocol 7? What is Protocol 7? Jake's smile was thin and cold. You wanted humans to know their place. Now we do. We're going home. He turned and walked toward the exit. Lisa followed. Their footsteps echoed in the suddenly quiet chamber. As they reached the doors. Jake spoke one more time without turning around. You'll get exactly what you voted for. A galaxy without human interference. I hope you're ready for it. The doors closed behind them with a soft hiss. In the chamber, hundreds of alien representatives sat in confused silence. They had won. So why did it feel like they had just made a terrible mistake? Captain Ryan Bell stood on the bridge of his cargo ship. The New Horizon was not a military vessel. It carried supplies and people between worlds. Today, it would carry people away from a world they had called home for 30 years. The planet. Below was called Kepler 442b. Humans had built a mining colony there. They dug rare metals from deep underground. The metals were used to build faster-than-light engines for ships across the galaxy. Without these metals, space travel would be much harder. "Captain," said his communications officer, "we're getting the evacuation signal from the colony." Ryan nodded. He had been expecting this. 3 days ago, every human in the galaxy had received the same message. Protocol 7. Time to go home. On the planet's surface, Dr. Emma Rodriguez packed her research equipment. She had spent 12 years studying the planet's geology. She knew more about Kepler 442b than anyone else in the galaxy. Her work had made the mining operation possible. Emma's assistant was a young human named Ben Carter. He was only 25 and had lived on this planet his whole life. His parents had been part of the original colony team. Dr. Rodriguez, Ben, said, "Are we really leaving everything behind?" Emma looked around her laboratory. Computers hummed quietly. Screens showed data from deep underground. Years of research sat in storage devices. All of it would stay here. "We take what we can carry," Emma said. "The rest stays." Outside the laboratory, the colony was busy with activity. Humans loaded personal belongings onto transport vehicles. Children who had never seen Earth asked their parents why they had to leave. Adults tried to explain something they did not fully understand themselves. The colony administrator was a man named Rick Thompson. He had managed this place for 8 years. He knew every tunnel, every machine, every problem that might come up. Today, he was preparing to hand it all over to someone else. Greg 7 was a Thaxian engineer. He had worked alongside the humans for 5 years. His green skin looked pale today. His 4 arms moved nervously as he watched the humans prepare to leave. "Rick," Greg 7 said, "the quantum extractors are very complex. The maintenance schedules alone require detailed knowledge of human engineering principles. How will we manage without your technical staff?" Rick shrugged. It was not his problem anymore. "You'll figure it out. Your people are smart." But the calibration sequences change based on planetary rotation and mineral density. The algorithms were written by human programmers. We don't understand the underlying mathematics. Rick handed Greg 7 a datapad. "All our technical manuals are in there. Everything we know about the operation." Greg 7 looked at the pad like it was a dangerous weapon. "Manuals are not the same as experience. Some of these systems have never been maintained by non-humans." "Then you'll learn," Rick said. "Humans aren't special. We're just people who figured things out through trial and error. You can do the same." Across the galaxy, similar conversations were happening on dozens of worlds. On the agricultural planet of New Eden, human farmers were packing up their lives. They had turned a barren world into the food source for 17 different star systems. Sarah Mitchell had been the chief agricultural coordinator for New Eden. She understood the complex balance of soil chemistry, weather patterns, and crop rotation that kept the planet productive. The automated farming systems responded to thousands of variables. Sarah had programmed most of them herself. Her replacement was a Centaurian named Kix 9. Centaurians were plant-like beings who understood agriculture in theory, but they had never managed systems on this scale. "The automated harvesters follow seasonal patterns," Sarah explained as they walked through endless fields of grain. "But the patterns change based on weather variations, soil moisture, and solar radiation. The system adapts in real time." Kix 9's leaf-like appendages rustled with concern. "How often do the patterns change?" "Every day," Sarah said simply. "Sometimes every hour during growing season." They stopped at a control station. Screens showed data from thousands of sensors across the planet. Temperature readings, soil analysis, growth rates, nutrient levels. The information flowed like a river of numbers. The main computer processes all this data, Sarah continued. It makes decisions about irrigation, fertilization, and harvesting schedules. But sometimes the computer gets things wrong. That's when human judgment becomes important. What kind of judgment? Kix9 asked. Sarah pointed to one screen. See those readings from Sector 7? The computer says everything looks normal. But I can tell something is wrong. The nitrogen levels are too stable. Real soil chemistry should show more variation. Kix9 studied the numbers. To him, they looked perfectly fine. How can you tell? Experience, Sarah said. I've been watching these patterns for 15 years. You learn to see things that don't show up in the data. On the other side of the galaxy, Dr. Tony Williams was closing down the medical research center on Vega Prime. The center had developed treatments for diseases that affected multiple species. Human doctors had a unique ability to understand medical problems across different biology types. Dr. Williams worked with a Rigelian colleague named Dr. Zector. Rigelians were excellent surgeons, but they had trouble with diagnostic work that required intuitive thinking. The cancer treatment protocols are all documented, Dr. Williams said as they walked through the empty laboratories. The equipment will continue to function automatically. Dr. Zector's long limbs moved in distress. But what about unusual cases? The protocols work for standard presentations of disease. What happens when symptoms don't match the expected patterns? Dr. Williams thought about all the times he had diagnosed rare conditions by noticing small details that didn't fit. Normal patterns. Human doctors were good at seeing connections that others missed. You'll adapt, he said. Medicine is about observation and learning. Keep good records. Share information with colleagues. Eventually, you'll develop the same instincts. Back on Earth, President Helen Carter sat in her office reading reports. Every human colony was shutting down on schedule. Every human research station was closing. Every human diplomatic post was being abandoned. Her aide, General Pete Watson, brought her the latest numbers. Ma'am, we're looking at the largest human migration in history. 3.7 million people coming home from 78 different worlds. Helen nodded. She had expected this. Protocol 7 had been developed years ago as a contingency plan. If humanity ever faced coordinated restrictions from the galactic community, all humans would return to Earth-controlled space. What about resistance? Helen asked. Any colonies refusing to comply? None, Pete said. Some people are unhappy about leaving, but they understand the situation. The council made their choice. Now we make ours. Helen looked out the window at Earth's blue sky. Soon, that sky would be filled with ships bringing people home. Earth would have to find room for millions of refugees from their own success. Pete, she said, how long do you think it will take for them to realize what they've done? Pete considered the question. The simple systems will start failing within a month. The complex ones might last 6 months. After that, he shrugged. They'll figure it out when ships stop moving and people start going hungry. Helen smiled, but it was not a happy expression. They wanted to limit human influence in the galaxy. They're about to learn the difference between limitation and elimination. As the evacuation continued, alien administrators across the galaxy were beginning to understand the scope of the problem. Humans had not just been workers or researchers. They had been the glue that held many complex systems together. The galaxy was about to become a very different place, and the species that had voted to restrict humanity were about to learn that some changes could not be undone. 6 months had passed since the humans left. The galaxy was starting to feel their absence. On Kepler 442b, Greg 7 stood in the mining control room staring at screens full of red warning lights. The quantum extractors had been working fine for 3 months after the humans departed. Then small problems started appearing. Now those small problems had become big ones. Status report, Greg 7 said to his assistant. A younger Thaxian named Kex 2. Extractor 7 is completely offline. Kex 2 replied, Extractors 3 and 12 are running at 30% efficiency. The others are showing stress indicators we don't understand. Greg 7 looked at the technical manuals the humans had left behind. The documents were thorough, but they assumed knowledge the Thaxians didn't have. The humans had written instructions like adjust quantum field harmonics based on mineral density variations. But how do you adjust something you don't fully understand? What about the replacement parts? Greg 7 asked. That's the bigger problem, Kex 2 said. The fabrication units that make replacement components are also failing. They were programmed by humans using human mathematical models. Greg 7 felt a growing sense of panic. This mining operation supplied rare metals to shipbuilders across the galaxy. Without these metals, new ships couldn't be built. Without new ships, trade would slow down. Without trade, the galactic economy would collapse. He had sent 17 messages to the humans on Earth, asking for help. None had received replies. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of New Eden, Kix 9 was facing his own crisis. The automated farming systems were making decisions that seemed random. Crops were being harvested too early in some fields and too late in others. Irrigation systems were flooding some areas while leaving others dry. Kix 9 studied the computer displays showing thousands of data points. Everything looked normal according to the programming manuals. But the results were clearly wrong. His assistant, a young Centaurian named Brix 4, brought disturbing news. The food shipments to the Rigel system are 3 weeks behind schedule. The population centers are reporting food shortages. What about the other agricultural worlds? Kix 9 asked. They're having similar problems. It seems that human agricultural coordinators were managing more than just their own planets. They were coordinating supply chains across multiple worlds. Kix 9 realized they had not just lost the humans from New Eden. They had lost the entire network of human agricultural specialists who had managed food production for hundreds of planets dot in the Andromeda trade sector. The economic problems were becoming severe. The Rigel Trade Consortium had been the galaxy's largest shipping company. Their computer systems had been designed by humans 50 years ago and maintained by human technicians ever since .vex-Tor. The Rigelian administrator watched helplessly as his shipping schedules collapsed into chaos. Ships were arriving at the wrong destinations. Cargo was being loaded onto the wrong vessels. The complex algorithms that managed interstellar commerce were failing in ways no one understood. The problem is the prediction software, his chief technician explained. It was designed to account for thousands of variables. Fuel costs, travel times, cargo priorities, political situations, weather patterns on different worlds. Human programmers created models that could adapt to changing conditions. Can't we reprogram it? Vextor asked. We've tried. But the original code was written in human mathematical languages. Our programmers don't think the same way humans do. Every change we make creates new problems. Vextor looked at the financial reports. The consortium was losing money every day. Other shipping companies were having the same problems. Trade between star systems was slowing to levels not seen in centuries. On the crystal world of Zephyros Prime, Speaker Valterra faced a crisis that threatened her entire species. The atmospheric processors that maintained their world's environment were failing. These machines had been built by Zephyrians, but modified by human engineers decades ago. The modifications had been necessary because Zephyrian technology was too rigid. It worked perfectly under normal conditions, but couldn't adapt to changes. Human engineers had added flexibility to the systems, allowing them to respond to unexpected problems. Now those adaptive subroutines were malfunctioning. The atmospheric processors were trying to respond to minor changes in solar radiation by making major adjustments to the planet's air composition. The oxygen levels in the northern continent are dropping, reported Chief Engineer Kreistal. The carbon dioxide scrubbers are working too hard in some areas and not enough in others. Veltara's crystal body flickered with stress patterns. What do the human technical specifications say? The specifications are clear about normal operations. Kreistal replied, but they don't explain how to fix adaptive systems that are adapting incorrectly. Veltara realized that human engineers hadn't just modified their machines. They had taught the machines to think more like humans. Now that the humans were gone, the machines were thinking in ways no one else could understand. In deep space, the exploration probe network was dying slowly. The automated probes had been humanity's greatest contribution to galactic knowledge. They had discovered thousands of new worlds and mapped dangerous areas of space. Commander Zek Prime of the Galactic Exploration Division stared at his star charts. Red dots marked the locations of failed probes. Each day, more probes went silent. The probes were designed to be self-repairing, his aide explained. But they need regular software updates to adapt new situations. The update schedules were managed by human technicians. Can't we create new updates? Zek Prime asked. We've tried. But the probe programming uses human problem-solving logic. They make decisions based on intuition and creativity, not just logical rules. Our programmers can't replicate that kind of thinking. Zek Prime counted the silent probes. Each one represented years of exploration work that was now lost. Without the probe network, the galaxy's expansion into unknown regions would stop completely. On Earth, President Helen Carter read the daily reports from her intelligence services. Every day brought news of new systems failing across the galaxy. The Zephyrians have requested emergency assistance with their atmospheric processors, her aide reported. The Rigelians are asking for help with their shipping networks. The Thaxians want our mining engineers to return to their colonies. Helen reviewed the requests. All of them were phrased as demands for humanitarian aid. None of them acknowledged that the Council's restrictions had caused these problems. Any official communications from the Galactic Council? Helen asked. No, ma'am. The Council hasn't met since we left. Apparently, they're too busy dealing with crises in their home systems. Helen stood up and walked to her window. Outside, construction. Crews were building new housing for millions of returning humans. Earth was crowded, but the planet was adapting. Humans were good at adaptation. Pete, she said to her aide, how many worlds have contacted us directly, bypassing the Council? Pete checked his notes. 47 worlds have sent direct diplomatic messages. Most are offering trade agreements or technology exchanges. Some are asking about defense pacts. Helen smiled. These were worlds that had worked closely with humans. They understood what they had lost when the humans left. They wanted to maintain their relationships, even if it meant ignoring the Council's authority. Draft a standard response, Helen said. Tell them we're open to negotiations, but all agreements must be bilateral. No Council oversight. No restrictions on human activities. Yes, ma'am. What about the worlds requesting emergency assistance? Helen thought about the Zephyrians and their failing atmosphere. She thought about the food shortages spreading across former human agricultural worlds. She thought about the shipping networks collapsing and the exploration program ending. Send them the same message we've been sending, she said. The Terran Federation is accepting applications for protectorate status. Full applications only. We're not interested in temporary fixes. Pete nodded. The Council won't like that. The Council made their choice, Helen replied. They wanted us to know our place. Now we do. We're not the junior partners anymore. We're not even partners at all, unless they can offer us something we want. Outside the window, Another ship full of returning humans was landing. Each ship brought people with skills and knowledge that the galaxy desperately needed. But those people were home now, working for humanity's benefit instead of the galaxy's. The Council had tried to limit human influence. Instead, they had concentrated it. Every human engineer, every human doctor, every human programmer was now working to make humanity stronger and more independent. The galaxy was learning that humans had never been just workers or researchers. They had been the problem solvers who kept complex systems running. Without them, those systems were failing one by one, and the humans were not coming back to fix them. 1 year after the humans left, the galaxy was falling apart. On Zephyros Prime, the crystal cities were dying. The atmospheric processors had finally collapsed completely. The air was becoming poisonous, even for crystalline beings who could survive. In harsh conditions, Speaker Velterra stood in her council chamber, but she was no longer the proud leader who had voted against humanity. Her crystal body was cracked and dull. Stress had damaged her internal structure. Around her, other Zephyrian leaders showed similar signs of deterioration. "How long do we have?" she asked her chief scientist. 3 months, Krystal replied. "Maybe less. The backup life support systems are also failing. They use the same human-modified technology." Velterra looked at the communication device on her desk. She had sent 43 messages to Earth. The humans had responded to exactly 0 of them. "What about evacuation?" she asked. "To where?" Every world with compatible atmosphere was connected to the same human-designed environmental network. Most of those worlds are having similar problems. Velterra realized that humans had not just helped individual worlds. They had created connections between worlds, sharing technology and expertise across vast distances. When the humans left, they took that entire network with them. Across the galaxy, the situation was getting worse every day. On New Eden, the food crisis had become a disaster. The automated farming systems had completely stopped working. Crops were dying in the fields. The planet that had fed 17 star systems could barely feed itself. Hicks 9 stood in a field of dead grain. The soil had turned acidic because the automated chemical balance system had malfunctioned. Years of agricultural research were lost. The knowledge of how to fix the soil was stored in human databases that no longer responded to alien access requests. "Sir," his assistant reported, "we're getting distress calls from the Rigel system. They're asking when the next food shipment will arrive." Kix 9 wanted to laugh, but Centaurians could not make that sound. "Tell them there won't be any more shipments. Tell them to start growing their own food." "But sir, the Rigel worlds are industrial planets. They have no agricultural capability." Then they should have thought about that before they voted to get rid of the people who were feeding them. In the Rigel system itself, the situation was desperate. 5 billion Rigelians lived on industrial worlds that produced manufactured goods for the galaxy. They had always traded those goods for food from agricultural worlds. Now the food wasn't coming, and their own industrial systems were failing. The manufacturing plants that had run perfectly for decades were breaking down. Human engineers had maintained and improved these systems over many years. Without that maintenance, the machinery was reverting to its original, less efficient designs. Administrator Vextor tried to contact other industrial worlds to buy food, but their communication networks were failing too. The galaxy-wide communication system had been designed by humans. It used adaptive routing protocols that could work around damaged equipment or busy channels. Now those protocols were failing, and worlds were becoming isolated from each other. "Sir," his aide reported, 3 more manufacturing plants have shut down completely. We're losing production capacity every day." "What's the status of our food reserves?" Vextor asked. 6 weeks remaining if we implement strict rationing immediately. Vextor stared at the numbers on his screen. 6 weeks to find a solution to problems that had been building for a year. He had been one of the voices supporting restrictions on humanity. Now his people were starving because of his decision. On the military frontier, things were even worse. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force had lost half of its human personnel when the Exodus happened. Those humans had been the ones who maintained the advanced weapon systems and coordinated complex military operations. General Kexmu of the Faxian Defense Corps faced a crisis that threatened the entire sector. 3 different wars had broken out as trade routes collapsed and resources became scarce. The peacekeeping force that should have stopped these conflicts was barely functional. Our battle computers are giving us tactical advice that makes no sense, his tactical officer reported. The human programmers built adaptive strategy systems that learn from each conflict. Now the systems are trying to apply lessons from previous wars to completely different situations. Kexmu studied the battle reports. The automated defense systems were shooting at their own ships. Navigation computers were sending fleets to the wrong coordinates. Communication systems were garbling orders and sending contradictory commands. What about our human-trained officers? He asked. Most of them transferred to Earth Command when the Exodus began. The few who remained don't have access to the classified human military databases. Kexmu realized that human military advisors had been more than just teachers. They had been the brains behind the galaxy's entire defense strategy. Without them, the military was like a body without a nervous system. The economic collapse was accelerating. The Galactic Trade Authority reported that interstellar commerce had dropped to 20% of previous levels. Ships couldn't navigate properly without human-designed routing systems. Cargo couldn't be processed without human-created inventory management. Currency exchanges were failing without human economic models. On the collective homeworlds, the hive mind was experiencing something it had never felt before: panic. The collective had always prided itself on logical decision-making based on complete information. But now their information networks were failing, and their logic was proving inadequate for solving human-created problems. The individual bodies that made up the collective moved frantically through their underground cities. Food production was failing because their agricultural systems had been optimized by human advisors. Transportation was breaking down because their logistics networks used human algorithms. Even their communication between different parts of the hive mind was stuttering because they had adopted human-designed signal boosters. Drone Prime, the individual body that spoke for the collective in external communications, sent increasingly desperate messages to Earth. Each message was more direct than the last. The final message was simple: the collective requests immediate assistance. We offer full alliance terms. Please respond. Earth did not respond. On Earth itself, President Helen Carter watched the galaxy's collapse with a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. The sadness was for the billions of innocent beings who were suffering because of their leaders' decisions. The satisfaction was for the vindication of humanity's value. "Ma'am," her intelligence chief reported, "we're seeing the formation of refugee fleets from 17 different worlds. Most are heading toward the outer rim, trying to find planets that aren't dependent on failing systems." "How many people are we talking about?" Helen asked. "Current estimates suggest over 50 billion displaced beings across the galaxy. The refugee crisis is spreading as worlds become unable to support their populations." Helen reviewed the reports from her monitoring stations. Human intelligence services had been tracking the galactic situation carefully. They had predicted most of these failures, but even they were surprised by how quickly everything was falling apart. "Any change in the Council's position?" she asked. "The Council hasn't been able to meet for 3 months. Too many member worlds are dealing with emergency situations. The few delegates who have tried to organize meetings can't establish reliable communication. Helen realized that the Galactic Council itself was a victim of its own decision. The Council relied on human-maintained communication networks to coordinate between distant worlds. Without those networks, the Council couldn't function as a governing body. What about individual worlds trying to negotiate directly with us? We now have formal requests from 137 worlds asking for bilateral agreements. 43 worlds have submitted applications for protectorate status. 8 worlds are asking to join the Terran Federation as full members. Helen smiled. These numbers represented a complete reversal of the political situation. A year ago, humanity had been a restricted junior member of the galactic community. Now, individual worlds were asking to join humanity's sphere of influence. Draft a response, she said. We'll consider applications from worlds that can demonstrate they offer genuine value to humanity. We're not interested in charity cases or emergency bailouts. Her aide looked concerned. Ma'am, some of these worlds are facing complete societal collapse. Billions of lives are at stake. Helen's expression hardened. Those same worlds voted to restrict our activities. They chose to limit our influence in galactic affairs. They made it clear they didn't need us. She walked to her window and looked out at the busy spaceports where human ships were launching every day. Those ships were carrying human colonists to new worlds that had never been part of the galactic community. Humanity was expanding again, but on their own terms. The galaxy had 300 years to learn how to work with us, Helen continued. Instead, they chose to fear us. Now they're learning the difference between partnership and dependence. Outside, another refugee ship approached Earth's orbital stations. It carried aliens fleeing from worlds where the infrastructure was collapsing. Earth was accepting some refugees, but only individuals with skills that could benefit humanity. The galaxy that had tried to contain, humanity was begging for human help. 18 months after the humans left, the Galactic Council finally managed to meet again. Only half the original members were present. The other half were too busy trying to keep their worlds alive. The Great Chamber looked different now. Many seats sat empty. The ones that were filled held delegates who looked tired and desperate. The proud species that had once voted to restrict humanity now looked like beggars waiting for help. President Flex stood at the center of the chamber. His long Regellian limbs shook with age and stress. The past year had been hard on everyone, but especially on the leaders who had to watch their civilizations crumble. The Council recognizes the motion to rescind Resolution 2847, he announced. His voice was weak but clear. Speaker Valterra tried to stand, but her crystal body was too damaged. She remained seated as she spoke. The Zephyrian Republic formally requests the immediate return of all restrictions placed on human activities. We acknowledge that these restrictions were a mistake. The word mistake hung in the air like a curse. It was the first time any council member had admitted error. One by one, other delegates voiced their agreement. The collective's drones spoke in broken sentences, their hive mind struggling with damaged communication networks. The Faxians mumbled their agreement through translators that barely worked. The Regellians simply nodded, too proud to speak, but too desperate to remain silent. The vote was unanimous. Every delegate present voted to remove all restrictions on humanity. President Flex looked around the nearly empty chamber. The motion passes. All limitations on human expansion, technology sharing, and galactic participation are hereby removed. But even as he spoke, everyone knew it was too late. The galaxy had changed. Humanity had changed. The old relationships could never be restored on Earth. President Helen Carter received the Council's message within hours. She read it carefully, then handed it to her aide. "What do you think, General Watson?" she asked. Pete Watson read the formal document. It was full of legal language and diplomatic phrases. But the meaning was simple. The Council was surrendering. "It's everything we would have wanted 18 months ago," he said. "Full restoration of rights. No restrictions on our activities. They're even offering us expanded representation on Council committees." Helen walked to her window. Outside, the skyline of New Geneva was changing. Massive construction projects stretched toward the horizon. Returning humans had brought new technologies and ideas. Earth was becoming more advanced than it had ever been. "But that was 18 months ago," she said. "The question is, what do we want now?" The answer came 3 days later. Earth's response to the Council was brief and direct. It was delivered by Ambassador Jake Morrison, the same man who had received the original restrictions. Jake stood in the same chamber where he had been, humiliated 18 months earlier. But now he was not representing a restricted junior member of the galactic community. He represented the most powerful independent force in the galaxy. "The Terran Federation acknowledges the Council's vote," Jake said. His voice was calm, but firm. "However, we must respectfully decline to resume our previous relationship." The remaining delegates stared at him in shock. This was not what they had expected. "The previous arrangement," Jake continued, "was based on the assumption that humanity needed the Council's approval for our activities. Recent events have demonstrated that the reverse is true." President Flex leaned forward. "Ambassador Morrison, surely we can negotiate new terms. Jake raised his hand for silence. "The Terran Federation is prepared to discuss bilateral agreements with individual worlds. We are no longer interested in multilateral arrangements through the Council." Speaker Veltara's damaged crystal body flickered with desperation. "But the Council has always been the foundation of galactic civilization. Without it, how will we coordinate trade, defense, and exploration?" Jake's smile was polite but cold. "That is no longer humanity's concern. You made it clear that you preferred to handle these matters without human involvement. We respect your choice." The chamber erupted in panicked voices. Delegates shouted questions and protests. But Jake simply turned and walked toward the exit. "Wait." President Flex called out. "What about humanitarian assistance? Billions of beings are suffering because of system failures." Jake stopped at the doorway. "The Terran Federation operates humanitarian aid programs for our protectorate worlds and allied systems. Applications for protectorate status are being processed in order of submission." He paused, then added, "I should mention that we currently have a waiting list of over 200 worlds seeking protectorate agreements." After Jake left, the chamber fell into stunned silence. The Council delegates realized they had lost more than just human cooperation. They had lost their relevance. Over the following months, the galaxy reorganized itself around new power centers. The Terran Federation became the dominant force, offering protection and technological support to worlds that could contribute to human interests. Some worlds thrived under these new arrangements. The Centaurian agricultural worlds that had worked closely with humans received advanced farming technology and guaranteed protection. In return, they supplied food to human colonies and military bases. The Andorian manufacturing systems were rebuilt with human engineering support. Their factories became more efficient than ever before, producing goods for the expanding human sphere of influence. But other worlds found themselves isolated and struggling. The proud Zephyrians watched their crystal cities slowly die as they waited for acceptance into the human protectorate system. Their application was denied twice because they had little to offer beyond their past. Hostility to humanity. The Rigelian industrial worlds faced a choice: submit to human economic dominance, or watch their people starve. Most chose submission, accepting terms that would have been unthinkable during the Council era. The collective's hive worlds became dependent on human communication technology to maintain their neural networks. The great hive mind that had once prided itself on independence now required human technicians to function properly. On Earth, President Helen Carter reviewed the quarterly reports from the new Terran territories. Humanity now controlled or protected over 300 worlds. The human population was spreading across the galaxy faster than ever before. "Ma'am," General Watson reported, "the former council worlds are requesting another meeting. They want to discuss the possibility of joining our Federation as a unified bloc." Helen laughed. It was the first genuine laughter she had felt in years. "They want to join us as a bloc? After spending months applying individually? Apparently, they've realized that their individual applications are being processed very slowly. They think a unified approach might be more appealing to us." Helen shook her head. "These are the same species that voted to restrict us because they feared human unpredictability. Now they want us to accept responsibility for their entire civilization." She stood up and walked to her wall display showing the current map of human space. Green dots marked human colonies. Blue dots marked protectorate worlds. Yellow dots marked allied systems. Red dots marked neutral or hostile territory. The map showed a galaxy dominated by human influence, but it was an influence based on strength rather than service. "Draft a response," Helen said. "Tell them the Terran Federation appreciates their interest, but we're currently focused on developing relationships with worlds that share our values of innovation, adaptability, and mutual respect." "What about their humanitarian crisis?" Watson asked. Helen turned back to her desk. On it sat reports of new human colonies being established in previously unexplored regions of the galaxy. Human ships were discovering new worlds and new resources every month. The restrictions that had once limited human expansion were gone, but so was any obligation to share the benefits with the galaxy that had rejected them. "General," she said, 18 months ago, the Council told us they didn't need human help to solve their problems. I suggest we respect their decision." Outside her window, ships launched every day carrying human colonists to new worlds. They carried human engineers to build better systems. They carried human doctors to establish medical facilities. They carried human teachers to spread human knowledge, but they only went to worlds that wanted them there. The galaxy had learned that humanity could be restricted, but only at the cost of everything that made galactic civilization work. The species that had feared human influence now competed desperately for human attention. They had tried to limit humanity's role in the galaxy and discovered that humanity didn't need a role anymore. Humanity had become the galaxy itself. The Council's great chamber sat empty most days now. When delegates did meet, they spent their time arguing about which worlds deserved priority consideration for human assistance. The organization that had once governed hundreds of worlds now existed mainly to beg for help from the species. Had tried to control Dot, and in the end, that was exactly what the Council had voted for. They had wanted a galaxy without human interference. They had gotten a galaxy where humans only interfered when it benefited humanity. The galaxy had panicked when humans walked out. Now they were learning